Jeff Scott surveyed the room one more time. Everything was in perfect order, just the way he liked it. Simple, neat, and spotless. Every object had its own designated place, reflecting his appreciation for a minimalistic aesthetic. This particular clinic had beckoned him on numerous occasions. It was well known that the salaries here exceeded those at his current workplace. Moreover, the nature of the work was quite different, more challenging, perhaps even exciting. On top of that, there were ample opportunities for advancing his professional skills and career. Yet despite these seemingly irresistible incentives, something always gave him pause. Memories that felt like an eternity ago came flooding back. He remembered how his father had brought him to this small town, a place he thought he had called home since birth. In reality, Jeff had been under the impression they had resided here forever. He believed he was a native of this place. However, the truth was that Jeff's mother had abandoned him shortly after his birth, leaving him under the sole care of his father. It was a revelation that had shocked him, redefining his perceptions of his own past. During his younger years, Jeff frequently asked questions about his mother, but his father, adept at evasion, consistently sidestepped his inquiries. However, when Jeff started school, he noticed that all the other children had mothers who would drop them off and pick them up. His own mother's absence became glaringly apparent. If his mother was deceased, as his father always claimed, why didn't they ever visit her grave? He couldn't recall a single instance where his father mentioned paying a visit to her final resting place. After a week of summoning the courage to confront his father, Jeff finally decided to broach the subject during a quiet Sunday dinner. "Dad, I have a question." "Sure, go ahead, son." "Dad, why does everyone have a mother except me? And please don't spin that 'I found you in a cabbage' tale. I know how babies come into the world." Caught off guard, Mr. Albert Scott nearly choked on his food. After clearing his throat and adjusting his seating position, he replied, "Well, I've told you many times that your mom passed away a long time ago." Jeff gave this some thought. He didn't believe this story any longer. "I think you're lying to me." His father looked taken aback. "Why would I lie to you, son?" "I believe you've been lying to me all this time." "Where is all this coming from, Jeff? Is it that friend of yours, Mike, putting these ideas in your head?" "Some children unfortunately don't have mothers, and you're one of them, son. Why do you keep bringing this up?" "Dad, how come we never visit her grave? We never talk about her or celebrate her birthdays. Willie's father passed away, and they all visit his grave, even though it's far away." Mr. Scott looked confounded. He ran his fingers through his hair and momentarily hid his face behind his hand. After a brief pause, he sighed and admitted, "Okay, I lied. You're right. I've been lying to you all this time. Your mom is alive. She just can't be with us because she's moved far away. You're still a child, Jeff. Let's make a deal. When you turn 13, I'll tell you everything. Is that all right?" At the time, Jeff was only 8 years old. However, he knew his father very well. If Albert made a promise, he always kept his word. Albert was not just a strict father. Sometimes he could be downright harsh. Jeff had everything a little boy could dream of. However, he also knew that any mishandling would bring about an equal punishment. As such, he developed a deep respect for his possessions and took good care of them. Jeff agreed to his father's terms, resolving to tuck his questions away until he turned 13. He had found temporary satisfaction in his father's promise, but he was determined to never forget that his father owed him the full story. On his 13th birthday, his father gifted him an impressive audio system. However, Jeff showed no interest in the present. He gently set it aside and looked at his father. "I'm 13 now, Dad. You promised to tell me about Mom." Albert froze, taken aback. He hadn't expected Jeff to remember, let alone bring it up. Sighing, he replied, "Well, if you believe you're ready to hear it, then it's time I tell you. Your mother left us for another man. They met when she was pregnant with you. As soon as she gave birth, she ran off. I honestly have no idea where she is now or how she is doing. Frankly, I don't really care." This was not what Jeff had expected to hear. He spent the next few days in quiet contemplation, wrestling with his feelings. He couldn't comprehend how his own mother could abandon her flesh and blood. He wondered if she ever spared a thought for her child's welfare. His mind whirled with these thoughts, his heart filling with anger and resentment. His one clear emotion towards his mother was hatred. He even thought that if she ever returned, begging for his forgiveness, he would refuse to even acknowledge her. Although the conversation with his father had happened years ago, it felt like it was just yesterday. The words remained etched in his memory as if he had heard them only last night. But it was not only the conversation that lingered in his memory, something else had pierced his heart, causing him immense pain. Now, in his 30s, Jeff was a renowned surgeon. Patients sought his expertise from all corners of the country. All of this was thanks to his father, who like a gloomy cloud had hovered over him, ensuring he never missed a class in college. When Jeff was presented with the opportunity for an internship at one of Europe's leading clinics, he faced a choice: take the internship or enjoy his college life with friends. It was Albert who issued the stern warning that helped Jeff make his decision. Jeff realized that without his father's firm hand, he wouldn't have reached the professional heights he currently enjoyed. Once he reached these heights, he understood that being a surgeon was his life's calling. He felt he understood something many doctors didn't. He didn't entertain the notion of "I can't" in his professional vocabulary. He knew that if he couldn't help a patient, there were very few who could. But now, faced with a simple case of lung inflammation, Jeff, one of the country's finest doctors, felt utterly helpless. For 3 days, he tried to convince his stubborn father, Albert, to get hospitalized. But Albert claimed he was too busy, too swamped with chores and errands to spare time for a hospital visit. He kept delaying it, promising to go the next day and then the next. On the 3rd day, Jeff had a critical surgery scheduled. The patient's condition was grave, requiring his full attention and expertise. Jeff woke up earlier than usual, making sure he was fully prepared and focused for the task at hand. He often treated serious cases with extreme caution and meticulous care. When he returned home that evening, exhaustion heavy in his limbs, something felt amiss. The house was unusually quiet. Normally, Albert would be watching the news loudly on the TV, eager to share his thoughts and observations, but the house was eerily silent, save for the faint murmur of the TV anchor. As Jeff walked into the kitchen for a glass of water, a horrifying sight stopped him in his tracks. His father lay unconscious on the floor. Without a moment's delay, he dialed 911 and performed all the necessary preliminary checks to ensure his father was breathing correctly until the ambulance arrived. The paramedics arrived within 10 minutes, and Albert was quickly rushed to the ER. Once his condition stabilized, Jeff arranged his transfer to one of the best hospitals in the city. After 12 hours, Albert regained consciousness, with Jeff steadfastly by his side. Albert weakly opened his eyes and offered his son a frail smile. He motioned for Jeff to come closer. "Jeff, there is something I need to tell you." "Dad, you need to rest right now. We can talk later. You need to build your strength. You'll need it, won't you?" Jeff replied, trying to lighten the mood with a smile. Albert smirked, almost as if dismissing his son's words. He looked at Jeff and smiled, his eyes beginning to water. "I said be quiet and listen." His voice trembled slightly, the words struggling to pass his lips. "Jeff, I have to tell you the truth. I will tell you everything." He paused, collecting his thoughts before he continued. "Jeff, your mother didn't abandon you. I took you away from her. I was the one who left. She married me because I loved her deeply. But she never reciprocated my feelings, son. She never loved me back." At this, Albert's eyes welled up even more. "I was in a position to force her to be with me. But after you were born, your mother lost her fear of me. She attempted to run away with you, and I couldn't allow that. Despite my obsessive love for her, my drive to control her overpowered everything else," he confessed, wiping away his tears. "I had wealth and influence. I did everything I could to prevent her escape, moving us from town to town until I was sure you wouldn't piece the story together." As Albert confessed, Jeff listened intently, without uttering a word. He had nothing to say in response to his father's shocking revelations. A silence hung heavily in the room,